You're listening to Faith for Normal People, the only other God-ordained podcast on the internet.
I'm Pete Enns.
And I'm Jared Bias.
We are very excited to let you know that 2026 will be the 10th anniversary of the Bible for Normal People. I mean, I'm sure you already knew that because you track our every move, but you never know.
All right. Rather than the normal 10th birthday stuff like video games or Nike Blazers, we're asking for your support. But if you wanted to send us video games, I don't think we'll turn you down. I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Anyway, now, as you know, our values are curiosity, playfulness, and accessibility. We've been able to bring the curiosity and playfulness, but over the years, we have needed folks like you to help with accessibility.
That's right. We've been able to give free access to 9 seasons of the podcast, dozens of pay what you can classes, which we mean, by the way, we only want people to pay what they can, even if that's $1. And we've given away lots and lots of scholarships for people to get into our society of normal people.
If you've enjoyed this podcast over the years and it's been meaningful and you have the ability to support us, we're launching a short campaign over the next month to raise $60,000. It's been a few years since we've had a campaign, but we have some things we want to do.
Yeah, one thing we want to do is provide Spanish language captions for all our classes. That accessibility is important to us so that people feel welcome, especially in our society of normal people. We've also had a lot of older folks in our audience, so we want to simplify our website and launch a simple-to-use app for our society members. We help dozens of folks each week navigate our sites, and we think it's just time to make it easier.
So to keep things accessible, available in Spanish, and easy to navigate, please consider joining the campaign as we continue our mission to bring the best in biblical scholarship to everyday people. Or if you just want to give us a little 10th anniversary gift because you like the podcast, that's great too. We're really swinging for the fences with this one.
Yeah, that's foreshadowing, by the way. To contribute,
Yes.
Just go to thebiblefornormalpeople.com/give. And thanks to everyone who has supported us over the years. You truly make the show possible. And as a gift to folks, every time we hit a goal in this campaign, we have some fun videos to share with everyone. We're going to be running the bases. I mean, of course, this campaign is going to be baseball themed. And every time we hit one of our goals, we're going to just post a fun video of me and Pete as a thank you. So if you want to help out or just want to see Pete drink a lot of milk while talking about the Bible, go to thebiblefornormalpeople.com/give.
On today's episode, we're talking about what to do when someone's wronged you with James Kimmel Jr. Now, James is a lecturer in psychiatry at the Yale School of Medicine and founder of the Yale Collaborative for Motive Control Studies.
Most recently, he's the author of the book, The Science of Revenge, which is very relevant for what we're talking about today. And he's also created the Miracle Court app, which we talk about in the episode, and sounds like a great tool if you're working through someone who has wronged you. So stick around at the end of the interview for quiet time, where we'll reflect on the conversation and talk more about revenge.
All right, let's get into the episode.
Forgiveness is extremely powerful drug that you don't need a doctor or a prescription for. You're hardwired to do it, and you can do it to heal yourself from the wrongs of the past, and you can use it as often as you like, or as Jesus said, 70 times 7.
James, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you for having me on your show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, to talk about what I think is a fascinating topic, and I hope that's the right term for it. So let's begin with, you have a very powerful personal story about revenge and how it affected you. So maybe just take us back there to get a sense of what that was like and how it drove you to think maybe in very fresh ways about those kinds of things.
So when I was about 12 years old, my folks moved me from, my brother and I, from a small suburban house to a home in the country that had been my great-grandfather's farm. And my great-grandfather was still alive at the time. I knew him well. He had a small herd of Black Angus cattle, and we had some pigs and things. And this was a great opportunity for me. I mean, 12 years old to land on a farm was like, descending onto another planet. But it was a beautiful planet, and I really was really excited about it. And part of my, kind of becoming a farm kid was trying to reach out to the other farm kids that were on the other farms around us. And they were on really big, working dairy farms with hundreds of head of cattle compared to our kind of gentleman farm that we didn't actually make our living from it. My dad, was an insurance agent, worked in the nearby town. But I loved it so much. I actually, my goal from maybe age 12 till, I don't know, 16 or so was I wanted to become a farmer. I mean, that's just how much I really wanted to be part of that community. And when I reached out to the farm kids around me to join in, with their fun and also to hang out with them on their farms, there was no interest in that. I mean, there was a lot of shunning almost from the beginning. And I think in hindsight, it was probably because, I was considered for them, in their out group. I was an outsider, just sort of parachuting in on their world. And I think they were suspicious and didn't really want to have a lot to do with me. But that wasn't enough to deter me. I just kind of doubled down on trying to get them to like me and consider me one of them, doing things like, joining VOAG classes in my school and Future Farmers of America and things like that, dressing like them, listening to their music, all of those kinds of things. But they still weren't having it. And as we got older, moving now to from age 12 to maybe 13, 14, 15 range, their shunning turned into bullying, and the bullying started, with a lot of humiliation and nasty talk, things like that. And then moved on to, light and then more kind of medium forms of physical violence in the school, getting on and off the bus, in gym classes and locker rooms and things like that. So it kind of turned on me into a sort of a pretty grim existence for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so around, I mean, age 16 at this point. So a little bit older. The guys who were hassling me were that age and a little bit older than that, maybe 16, 17. And one night, very late at night, my folks and I and my brother were asleep late at night, and we were awakened to the sound of a gunshot. And so we, jumped out of bed and raced to the windows. And I saw a pickup truck owned by one of the guys who had been bullying and tormenting me, taking off down the road away from our house. And we lived on this one-lane country road. So we checked around the house to see if there was any damage, and things looked okay. Thought maybe they had been spotlighting deer, which is not terribly uncommon, but also not legal, but people do it. So the next morning, before going to school, one of my jobs was to take care of our animals, that herd of cattle. And we had some pigs by that point, chickens, and this beautiful, sweet little beagle hunting dog that we had, whose name was Paula. And when I went up to her pen to feed and water her that morning, I found her lying dead with a bullet hole in her head in a pool of blood. The initial response to this, unbelievable escalation in violence over, I couldn't figure out what, honestly. But our initial response was to call the police, kind of the right thing to do. But this was early 80s, no real anti-bullying programs in my school to manage it there. And the state police weren't very interested in it as well. And it wasn't that they weren't sympathetic, but, they took a report and, said if it escalates beyond that, obviously contact us and we'll have this on record. But they didn't really do anything. So 3 weeks passed, and I found myself alone late at night. My folks were out somewhere. My brother was gone as well. And I heard a vehicle come to a stop in front of our house. And I got up to look outside to see what was happening. We lived on this one-lane country road, like I said. So it was unusual to have that happen. And as I looked out, there was that same pickup truck again, and there was a flash and an explosion. And they had just blown up our mailbox, and the truck took off down the road. And, with that truck and with that explosion, went what was left of my self-control. So, we'd been hunters. I'd been shooting guns since I was probably about 8 years old. And my dad had a loaded revolver in a nightstand, and I went and I grabbed it, and I took off through the house. I jumped in my mother's car, and I went after those guys through the middle of the night, just shouting and screaming in rage. and driving as fast as I could until I was able to corner them on one of their barns. And so, it's their pickup truck kind of up against a barn, and me and my car behind that truck with my bright beams on, and I can see 3 or 4 heads in the rear window. And they slowly are getting out of the truck, and I'm looking at them, and they're turning around and squinting through my headlights to see who had just come, charging down their road. And what was clear to me at that moment was, they were unarmed, that they didn't have anything in their hands, no weapons in their hands, maybe in the truck, but I don't know. And that they couldn't have known that I had a gun. And so I really had the element of surprise at that point. And, I started to open the door and put my leg through the opening and grab that loaded revolver off the passenger seat. And just at the last moment before I, went through the door and stood up to do, I don't know, do something to get the payback that I wanted for about 4 or 5 years of abuse, including the killing of my dog. I had this flash of insight, just little inspiration. May have been the voice of God. I'm not really sure, but this idea came through my head that if I went through with what I wanted to go through with and survived it, I would never be the same person again. The same guy who drove down that road. I would be. I'd have to identify myself in an entirely different way that would be irreparable, and that would be as a killer. And I knew I wasn't that guy. I didn't want to become that guy. I didn't want that label. And that was just enough of an insight to get me to, stop and reconsider for a second, pull my leg back in the door, and put that gun back down on the passenger seat and drive home. But I came within seconds of committing a horrific act and a true tragedy.
It's a harrowing and very sad story about this topic. So you're clearly very intimately associated with revenge, but also the pain and the violence that is perpetrated against you, and having to deal with that. And then fast forwarding in your story, you eventually become an attorney. And I'm curious if you can connect dots on what it seemed like those are not unrelated things. And so maybe you can say something about that and how that informed your later work about revenge to kind of bring us up to where you are now, just in terms of your work and vocation.
Yeah, happy to do that, Jared. So, one thing that was clear in the days or weeks after this event was that my dream of becoming a farmer was over and done with, right? Mm-hmm. And so I had to kind of reset my goals, and I hadn't been an academically directed student, which is a polite term for really bad grades and not being very interested in classwork. So I was not the shining star of my high school up to that point. But I got the idea that maybe that was a group of kids and a way of life that would accept me more than what had happened to me with the farm kids. And so I started to look into that a little more carefully and pick up the pace in terms of my academics. And I came upon the idea of becoming a lawyer. And, I say that's really the idea of getting into the professional revenge business.
Oh, right.
And that's because that's what we're really litigators and prosecutors, lawyers who do that kind of work, are being hired to get, a legalized form of revenge for their clients or society. And we do it under the brand name justice. But regardless of the brand that we do it under, it's the same revenge seeking. It just has maybe a few more steps and a lot more formalization between the beginning point or the end of the grievance and the desire for revenge being gratified. And there's more distance, and that's useful. It's useful for society. It's useful for all of us, but it's limited in its use. In any case, I decided ultimately to become a lawyer. I went on to law school. I became a lawyer. I became a litigator. And I got really into that business. And what I found in doing that was not only were people willing to pay me and my law firm, ridiculous amounts of money to get this satisfaction of punishing the people who wronged them, And I started, as a prosecutor at first, which is not a well-paid job. And then I moved into private litigation pretty quickly because I had student loans and I needed that money. But when you're doing that, practicing law that way, and you're trying to hurt the people who hurt your clients, for me, that started to become its own gratification process. I was really enjoying even the smallest wins inside a case that would make the other side's day a little worse and their clients feel a little worse. And I also sensed that was happening to me from the lawyers on the other side, and that's what their clients were looking for as well. And so we were all kind of locked in this process of what looked like revenge gratification to me, and it started to bleed out of my professional life into my home life, and I became kind of an avenger extraordinary, not only at work but at home with my wife, with my kids, with other people, and this was directly in conflict with. I'm a spiritual guy. I'd been raised as an Episcopalian. My grandfather was a minister in the Brethren Church. I had thought before going to law school a little bit, and even after law school, about going to seminary and maybe becoming an Episcopal priest, and looked into it and eventually found that wasn't really right for me. But the ideas behind the Sermon on the Mount and Jesus's teachings about forgiveness were really in conflict with what I was doing as my professional career. And I tried to pull away from it. And the more I tried to pull away from it, the more I felt drawn back into it and missing these really, these highs that I was getting from winning parts of cases or entire cases. It seemed to be kind of a habit, and I seemed to be hooked on something. And I began to wonder, is it possible to become addicted to revenge? Is that a thing? And in the earliest times, my first book called Suing for Peace, which was a spiritual journey to unravel this. I didn't call it addiction to revenge. I called it addiction to justice in the form of revenge. And that was my real focus there. And I didn't have any scientific proof for it, but it sure felt like and looked like to me what other people who struggle with other addictions like drug, alcohol, tobacco, and gambling addictions are facing. And that launched me on an entirely new path, the third phase of my career, in which I became a researcher at Yale to try and figure out the answer to that question.
Yeah. So what really strikes me in all this is the power that revenge has legitimately. I mean, I'm going to say in your case, certainly, I mean, you were traumatized by this, and revenge was a way, I'm not playing therapist here, but, revenge was a way of coming to terms of protecting yourself or whatever you had to do. And then it sort of bled over into legal and your second family. But now we're talking about the brain, right? And so this is a good place maybe to sort of bring into this, talk about neuroscience and revenge and what that does to the brain and how it works.
Yeah, great question. So up until about 20 years ago, science had completely ignored revenge desire, revenge motivation. It hadn't been a question that scientists were asking or interested in investigating. And it was at the very end of me, when I wrote this book, Suing for Peace, which came out in 2005, and I was finishing the manuscript. And just before I'd finished it, there was an article in the New York Times about this amazing brain imaging study that took place at the University of Zurich, in which they, kind of for the first time put somebody under fMRI, or it was a PET scan maybe at that time, to try and see what's going on inside the human brain when somebody has a grievance and is given an opportunity to retaliate. That is to say, to punish or inflict pain upon the person who wronged them. And this was in a set of economic games. And what they found there in that first earliest study is that having a grievance cues the brain or causes the brain to activate the reward craving and processing center of the brain. In that study, it was the dorsal striatum, which is also the habit forming center of the brain. So we had the first little bit of evidence at that time that supported my thesis that we can get hooked on this. It can become a dangerous addiction, and that maybe is the root cause of human violence, because we know from other behavioral studies around the world and public health data and law enforcement data that it is the desire for revenge, a grievance-triggered desire for revenge, that is the singular kind of root motivation for almost all forms of human violence and intentionally inflicted suffering, starting with bullying, as I experienced, and going up through intimate partner violence to gang violence and street violence, violent extremism, police abuse of force and brutality, terrorism, war, genocide. All of those generally have this perception by somebody at some point that, hey, you did something wrong, and it's going to now I'm now going to come after you, and I'm going to hurt you for it.
Is there any, like sociologically or even evolutionarily, is there any reasons behind this grievance? And if it's reward center, it seems like it came about for some particular purpose. Like, what was the reasoning behind it that seemed to cohere us as a society, or something like that? It seems like there's got to be some reason there.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And so the desire for revenge, I guess a few things. Evolutionary psychologists, the leading theory is that it is an evolved adaptive strategy, probably from the Pleistocene epoch or the Ice Age. And the desire for revenge evolved when humans started to live in social groups and needed a way for the members of the social group to comply with social norms, and also to stop or at least deter bad behaviors that would interfere with the ability to survive or procreate. So, taking your mate, or stealing stuff stealing your food. Those are just kind of basic concepts. And that made sense probably back at that time to motivate people to do this in order to have humanity progress. But now in 2025 here, we have a lot of revenge seeking, maybe the dominant amount that comes from perceived wrongs or grievances or injuries to the ego, right? Just the ego. It's not, your survival is almost never at stake, but you just feel bad if somebody insults you, betrays you, humiliates you, these types of things. And we also have, really powerful and widely available weapons that can do a lot of damage to people fast. And so having this, this desire that's built in and hardwired into everybody's brain, it's fine, but we need to actually be able to control that perhaps better now than we used to be able to, 10,000 or 50,000 years ago.
The question bubbling in my head, just the more you've talked, and it started when you mentioned justice is, revenge with a different brand. And how do you decide the difference? Because I think there's a real danger here where we at best have mixed motives, maybe at worst delude ourselves into thinking that our desire for revenge is righteous, it's the right thing. And so it's very easy and slippery to go back and forth between justice and revenge. So how do you decide the difference?
Yeah, great. An important question. And I think, the idea of deluding ourselves is, you've kind of hit the nail on the head right there. Justice means, to many of us, right, to many people, it means fundamental fairness, equity, love. It's a concept that Jesus taught. It's a concept that Martin Luther King taught, that Gandhi taught. It's what we think about when we think about social justice. It doesn't have revenge as a component of it at all. It's just trying to treat everyone fairly and equally as brothers and sisters. On the other hand, though, we have a world now that uses justice as the polite, politically correct term we use now when we mean revenge, because revenge is an uncomfortable word. So, for instance, after the terrorist attack on the World Trade Towers and the Pentagon and Flight 82 on 9/11. President Bush didn't come out to the people and say, we're going to bring the terrorists to revenge. He said, we're going to bring the terrorists to justice. And what he meant, and I think we all knew what he meant, was that we're going to go and get revenge, and we're going to make it big, and we're going to be relentless about it. And that didn't mean that we were going to bring the terrorists to fairness and equity and love. It meant we were going to hurt and kill people. And that's exactly, of course, what happened. And we do this a lot in our own minds and socially, up and down the scale from an individual person who goes, I was wronged, and it is equitable and fair for me to now wrong you and punish you and make you feel pain for it. And there is an elegant sense to that. It's a false chase, but there is a sense to that of balancing the scales or giving payback because you took something from me. What you took from me was my happiness. I'm going to now try and get my happiness back by punishing you. Oops, I can't really take happiness from you and give it to myself. So I'll make you feel bad in just the same way that you made me feel bad. And we'll call that justice. And it licenses by calling it justice, because justice means all these beautiful things that our greatest human examples have taught. But by calling that justice gives us license to do the most horrific, terrible things that humans have always and forever and are continually capable of, including war and genocide and torture and everything in between there.
I was going to ask if you could clarify. You said something that I think is pretty profound, more as an aside, but maybe you can unpack it a little bit, where you said some people will try to take your happiness and apply it to me. It's sort of level setting, right? There's a zero-sum game here. We're equal. You've come onto my territory and you've taken something from me. And so I think if I retaliate, I'm going to get that thing back. And happiness doesn't really work that way. And I think that's maybe a fundamental thing to talk about when we're talking about revenge, because I think we do get something. There is like a dopamine hit, or there is a sense of gratification when we retaliate. But maybe what we are hoping for is this deeper sense of joy, or the thing that we lost was a sense of happiness. And we think this dopamine hit's going to give us that, but it gives us some level of satisfaction, but it feels more like a sinister sense of satisfaction. It's sort of like the negative of, the inverse of the joy. But can you say more about that? I'm just kind of reeling about that.
Sure. Yeah. So we'll swerve back a little bit into the brain science. So, what later studies have shown is that so humans derive enormous pleasure and satisfaction from inflicting revenge or punishment upon people who wronged them or their proxies. So we can get revenge not only against the person who wronged us, but we can get this revenge satisfaction even by targeting someone who had nothing to do with the original grievance. And a simple example of that is, for instance, you've had a bad day at work. Maybe your boss or a coworker insulted you or mistreated you. You can't retaliate at work because maybe you'll lose your job. So you go home. It's safer to, quote unquote, kick the dog or pick an unfair fight with your intimate partner or do something like that, or even slug a wall and take it out. We call it take it out, but we're really getting revenge by proxy against an easier, more defenseless target. But we're still getting revenge, and we're still getting some of that gratification. And that comes from activating that pleasure and reward circuitry, specifically the nucleus accumbens, which is responsible for driving craving. And so, what happens inside your brain really is a grievance activates the pain network, which is known as the anterior insula. So it's a physical pain that you get from humiliation and betrayal and insults and disrespect. You really feel it. I mean, it's inside your brain in a physical way. And that cues your brain to start seeking revenge, pleasure. And this gives us this short-term, short-lasting dopamine hit, which falls away pretty fast. But that motivates you. The disappearance of the dopamine is what motivates you to want to seek more and more and more of it and move it from just revenge fantasy into revenge real-life action. So you're right, Jared, that we get a short burst of pleasure. And so it seems like by, going and inflicting pain upon the person who wronged us, we're going to get our happiness back. But it's such a false happiness because it's not the happiness that we had before. It's a temporary dopamine hit. And the huge consequences of it are very negative because you can't become the instrument of another person's pain without experiencing that pain yourself. And you're putting yourself in, and studies have shown that people feel worse, not better, after gratifying this desire for revenge. And they create new rounds, endless cycles of revenge seeking, because my act of justice seeking toward you, as ours was, for instance, after 9/11, becomes the target's victimization and grievance experience, and recreates for them a desire to retaliate back against us. And this goes on in endless cycles.
Why prefer revenge over justice? Why do we go there? And I think the brain chemistry thing helps me understand that. Justice takes time. You can't get immediate gratification. It's like scrolling on your phone or something like, I'm getting the dopamine hits. Like, well, delay it. I don't want to delay it. This is the whole point. I want to keep getting these hits. And, and the effect that has on us individually and then as a society, this is a very clarifying discussion for me. It's also a rather frightening one. Because it's if there is almost an evolutionarily built-in desire to seek revenge, to transcend that. Laws ideally do that, but I agree with what you're saying. Justice is just a nice word we throw onto some type of revenge. We're going to get somebody and hold them guilty for this. The public needs it. We want to do this. It's almost like a scapegoating kind of thing. And, if we're wired in certain ways, like what's the hope of getting out of this cycle? I felt it myself. I mean, who hasn't felt revenge and feeling good? Like when I give a great answer to some idiot on social media, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to mention anybody. Like I feel so good when I do attacked. That. I feel. Is it me? Well, we'll talk later, Jared. But I feel good about that. And for me to sort of take a step back, it's my moral beliefs, it's my religious beliefs that sort of ground me there. Mm-hmm. But I'm also not 20 years old either. And I've had a relatively stable life. I haven't had a ton of trauma that I'm dealing with. So I'm wondering, maybe this is a bigger question we can get into in the time we have left, but just how to give individuals hope, a hard hope, maybe that it's going to take work, but a hard hope to move beyond the cycle that seems baked into our DNA.
Yeah, a couple of things there. So first of all, in terms of that sort of, it sounds scary. We're all also hardwired. Every human being experiences euphoric pleasure from opioids, right? We all have it. We can live at peace with opioids, and sometimes an opioid will be useful, right? If it's used medically to stop pain from a surgery or to put us under so that we can have some sort of disease or a broken bone corrected, that's fantastic and very useful. If it's used or abused, then that becomes very problematic and can ruin your life. And that's the same way with revenge seeking. It can be, used as sometimes, let's think about teaching a child a rule like don't run across the street without looking both ways. And I've explained this to you now 10 times. I just watched you do it again. I'm so glad that there wasn't a bus coming down and didn't, run over you. But I'm going to have to now add some additional sort of pain moment that's going to be safer because I want to protect and save your life today. And so I'm going to do that. That is, the purpose of that pain is not your own pleasure. It's to teach a lesson that might become a life-saving lesson for your child. Versus, I'm going to give you some pain for that, and then I'm going to continue doing it because it kind of makes me feel good when I punish you this way and I can get away with it because I'm your dad. That's a different thing. That looks more like addiction when you can't control it despite the negative consequences. So the desire for revenge itself, not an addiction, and it's not pathology. It's not a disease. The inability to control that desire, despite knowing negative consequences, and even more so if that becomes habit forming, that moves into a more of a pathological type of state and disease. So that's one thing to think about, is that we're not talking about all revenge. The second point I want to make is that we're also not talking about self-defense. Self-defense operates in a different area of your brain. That's really driven primarily by the amygdala. And that is, your fight or flight instinct that comes on board immediately to potentially save your life in a situation in which there's an imminent threat of harm to yourself or someone you love. I'm not, and none of the research impinges on that. That's very different, and that means a real threat. That's very different from revenge seeking, which is always past looking. It's trying to avenge and punish a wrong from the past that is no longer, even none of us can experience a wrong from the past. It only lives in a few people's memories and those who we tell about it, and that's about it. So revenge seeking is past looking, and it drags these grievances and wounds and traumas from the past, and it keeps inflicting them on the present and the future and contaminating that and ruining our lives. So, revenge is that, and it's not self-defense. So there's no desire here by me or any of this research to suggest that people should become victims, specifically not, because it's victimization that triggers this entire process. Self-defense, good. Revenge seeking, bad, might be the best way to put it. And then, to give people, though, the real hard answer to your question of, so how do we manage this going forward? There are two ways. One is by seeing revenge seeking as an addictive process. This brings on board and makes available all of our already existing addiction prevention and treatment strategies that humans have developed, particularly with intense effort over the last 30 or so years. And so things like educating kids about not only the cravings that we want them to be aware of, like drugs, alcohol, and sex and health classes, we ought to also be telling them about, you're going to experience grievances and a real strong desire to punish other people in your life. And that's natural, but here are some ways for you to manage that, and up through treating people, with addiction treatment strategies. But I won't get into that, because the more potent and powerful, and I think more interesting for this discussion, remedy for all of this turns out to be forgiveness. Let me just explain what happens inside your brain when you simply imagine forgiving a grievance or somebody who wronged you. So if you remember, I said a grievance activates the pain network, the anterior insula. When you forgive, brain studies now show that inside your brain, that idea of simply imagining forgiveness deactivates the pain network. It actually takes the pain away. So going back to that example of moving pain from one person to another and how that doesn't really work, what forgiveness does is it shuts down pain. It stops pain. It's like a wonder drug or a superpower that we don't use enough and that we kind of look askance at because we think the word give and forgiveness is a gift to the person who wronged you, and it's really not. It's a gift to yourself. The second thing that it does is it shuts down the craving network for revenge desires. So you no longer have these nagging revenge desires. And the third thing it does is it activates the prefrontal cortex, which is your executive function and decision-making strategy. So you're able to make good cost-benefit decisions. So forgiveness, even if you're an atheist, forgiveness is extremely powerful drug that you don't need a doctor or a prescription for. You're hardwired to do it. And you can do it to heal yourself from the wrongs of the past. And you can use it as often as you like, or as Jesus said, 70 times 7.
Can you say more about some of the mechanics? Because I think for me, I have specific instances in mind where people have said, hey, you just need to forgive them. Or I even thought that, as a Christian, it's like, this is the Christian thing to do. I should forgive them. But it feels like it's such an emotional process that just saying, I forgive you, doesn't actually activate all the things you're talking about. There seems to be some kind of process that goes on in forgiveness that would be of great benefit, but it doesn't ever feel like to me like it's a 3-step program. It feels like a jumbly mess. So maybe you can help get it in line for me so I actually know how to do it.
And maybe if you could, James, weave into that. I wanted to ask that question too. Just what is forgiveness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Okay.
yeah.
So forgiveness, so psychologists recognize or have identified two types of forgiveness. One is decisional forgiveness, and the other is emotional forgiveness.
Yeah.
So decisional forgiveness is a decision to forgive. And it can be made regardless of any intention to repair the relationship. And it can be made without ever communicating that decision to the person who wronged you. So it's an entirely internal, very profound personal decision to go, I am going to move on from what you did to me. I'm leaving it in the past. I'm making that decision. And to experience the benefit of that, you can experience that very quickly by imagining any grievance that you might, have in your mind. And we all tend to do this. Freud thought that we are endlessly, hour by hour of every day, doing away with the people who insult us and wrong us or get in our way. And so we have these things. And if you just imagine a grievance that you haven't let go of, and just imagine now deciding to forgive it. If you decide to forgive that, just that decision, and then I say, how would you feel if you did that? You don't have to forgive it. Just imagine what you might feel like. Almost invariably, people will respond to me and go, oh, wow, I would feel a lot better right now. Like I would feel all this weight of having to plot and scheme how I'm going to get back at them. That's gone. That's been lifted. I would also feel the disappearance of the pain that I've been carrying around. All of a sudden, that's gone. And we can see how that's happening inside the brain is it's shutting down that pain network, like I said, and it's shutting down the craving circuitry of the brain. So you're actually getting brain biological benefit from making a decision to forgive that can be just that simple. You can experiment with it. And then if the memories of the grievance and the pain return, do it again and do it again. And you'll find that decision has suddenly become 70 times 7 permanent. I think, we now have brain science that kind of supports Jesus' teaching there, I think. And it really is a profound thing. That's different from emotional forgiveness. And emotional forgiveness is this amazing kind of brain trick that people can do and have the ability to do that's based on their empathy center of the brain and their ability to imagine the thinking process of someone else and what was going on in their minds. And when we activate that, and I can't say that I can explain how we do this, but it can be a choice, like decisional. But when we do that, we can reform an entire grievance scenario and the pain around it to make it feel like, oh, maybe that person was a little more justified than they thought. Or maybe I had a little more responsibility and I played a bigger role in what happened than I thought. And so we gain new insight. And then the third thing is we gain more empathy toward the person who wronged us. But that's a longer process and it's more emotional. That's, that's the emotional forgiveness process. But to really make this hard and fast and make forgiveness a lot easier to do and more satisfying, because some people might be going, well, geez, I don't want to forgive. I hate what this person did to me. I cannot give up my pain and I don't want to. I created and studied a system at Yale called the Miracle Court or non-justice system, in which you're given, it's a role play in which you get the opportunity to put on trial anybody who's ever wronged you in your life, but you play all the roles. So you play the prosecutor and victim, and you play the defendant testifying as to their side of the story. You play the judge and jury finding guilt or innocence and handing down a verdict. And then you play the warden administering that punishment. And then in the last step, which I call the final judgment. In the final judgment, you become the judge of your own life. And in that moment, you have to decide for yourself, do I want to continue to carry this pain and this desire for revenge and this plotting and scheming that I've been doing and rumination? Or do I want to let it go? And what we found in our studies is that most people would rather let it go and move on with their lives. And that creates the opportunity for decisional forgiveness. So there's your 5-step program, Jared, for getting through that.
Well, just a quick thought here. I think what you're talking about is humanizing the perpetrators in a sense, right? I mean, it's seeing, trying to maybe understand them better, empathy, right? Which is a maligned word nowadays, right? We don't.
Yeah.
Empathy's bad. I think empathy's fantastic. It reminds me too of Jesus, take the log out of your own eye first. Look at yourself first, putting yourself in different roles and seeing what, might have been. I don't want to use the word responsibility. I don't think you had any responsibility in what happened to you as a child and as a young man. I don't think you had responsibility, but there's still something of value, I guess, of looking at those different roles and putting yourself through that maybe gives you, I don't know, isn't this right way to put it, a bigger vista from which to look at these experiences and maybe address them differently and maybe to give energy for forgiveness.
Well, what I like about the way we're talking about it is tying in that neuroscience. And I can't help but think about the amygdala, that fight or flight, where you don't have that executive function. So, and I tie it to the idea of imagination, because that's kind of, when you talk about your 5-step program, it feels like one of the core skills is imagining. And if you can at first just imagine what it would be like to forgive someone, if you can just do that, which feels like something you can maybe conjure up in that amygdala state, then and it kind of feels good. It kind of lowers that anxiety when it feels good to just imagine that. Then that prefrontal cortex can come online, and now you can do a little bit more of the heavy thinking, which would be imagining, like you said, the courtroom scene, which allows me to reframe the whole situation, which then maybe allows me to kind of reduce that attribution error and some of my own things that come up when I'm trying to defend myself. I'm trying to protect myself in that amygdala state. But for me, I think the thing I keep hearing is imagination. If we can work to imagine it, it gets us into these brain states that help us to really, like you said, I'm not going to try to take responsibility for how I could have behaved better or avoided the pain or what did I do to grieve them. I can't get there if I'm still in this fight or flight defense posture. Does that make sense?
Well, or yeah, except the only thing I would change there is I'm still in this craving for revenge for the dopamine hit posture, right? But otherwise, I agree completely. And what it seems to be happening, trauma psychiatrists and psychologists seem to say that to recover from trauma, trauma victims, need to be heard, and they need a way to hold somebody to account for what happened. And in this non-justice system, that 5-step method that I just described is it gives you all of that. It gives you the ability to be heard in a courtroom. It gives you the ability to hold to account because you're holding the person guilty. And then, like methadone for a revenge addict, it gives you the ability to safely experience, this revenge desire and acting it out and inflicting the pain you want to inflict on that person. And then when that's out of your way and that craving is now out of your way, you can then, as judge of yourself, begin to look at the situation and go, oh, this didn't really help me at all. I don't want this anymore in my life. I want to be done with it, and I want to move on. And so I think that seems to be what's happening in that process.
Well, as we wrap up our time here, are there ways that people can get into this? Because again, I feel like there are steps between I feel these grievances and I do want to retaliate, and having the ability to forgive. And are there ways to get connected to this exercise where you can do that maybe on your own, where you can think through this courtroom setting? And are there other exercises? Like, where would you point people who are saying, yeah, this is something that, because I can just see, you talked about being online. I just see it online a lot where the grievances are very easy to come by, like the disrespect and that they said this about me and they said this, and Democrats are this way and Republicans, like, we're being hurt by entire groups of nameless, faceless people at this point. So is there a way that people who are starting to notice, oh yeah, I get triggered a lot in this way. How can I stop this addiction cycle? Like, what are the first steps?
Yeah, there is an online way and an offline way, as a matter of fact. So the online way is, there is an app called the Miracle Court app, and it's available at miraclecourt.com. It's a free app. It doesn't even have an in-app purchase. And that is the entire 5-step method that I just described as audio, with me leading you through. I'm the voice leading you through these 5 steps that I just described. So that's the Miracle Cord app that anybody can use at any time, anywhere. And likewise, in my book, The Science of Revenge, I have the complete script. So if if the app doesn't work for you, or you're a person who'd rather read rather than jump on an app, in the book is that entire 5-step process. In the book, and it's available for people to use. So there are 2 ways to get after it, right away and experience it. And if that's not enough for you at that point, then seriously consider talking to a mental health professional. But kind of come to them with this idea of I feel like I might be caught up in in a behavioral addiction process. That here's a book. It's called Revenge Addiction, and I want some help because even if they haven't heard of revenge addiction, most mental health professionals are trained in helping people manage addiction. And addiction is addiction. There's the same kind of methodology for helping people out of it in most cases. So that would be the third and more escalated way of handling it.
Right.
Well, thanks for coming on. I think for me, I just appreciate the courage. I mean, you have such a story that sort of sparked your interest in all of that, just the vulnerability to talk about that story and what could have been, as a great way to sort of couch this conversation. I just think it makes it very meaningful and personal. So thank you
and a lot of wisdom for our age too, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
So thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity to be on your show. I really appreciate it, Peter and Jared. It's been fantastic.
And now for quiet time
with Pete and Jared. Jared, I personally have never had any feeling of revenge for anybody my whole life, but you probably have. So maybe do you have a revenge story to tell us?
Yeah, you may not have a revenge story, but you are a liar. So we're even.
Wow, that triggers me. I'm going to have to kill you now.
No, you aggrieved me. I aggrieved you back.
You right back.
Exactly. No, I mean, I think I was, as we were reflecting on this episode, I was trying to think of what those triggers were. When I was a kid, I had a pretty bad temper, and it would have come from this sense of a grievance. And I think for me, the trigger was when I was humiliated. If there was a sense of embarrassment, and one thing came to mind immediately was I had a starter jacket, which in the 90s, every kid had a starter jacket. Every kid had a weird starter jacket. It was like the Charlotte Hornets or the Orlando. It's like not the teams that you liked. You didn't necessarily have. Anyway, it was weird. But we were playing like a game, I don't know, tag or football or something, and someone ripped the hood of my starter jacket, and I was seeing red, and I went up to him and I started wailing on him. Just
really?
Yeah. And it wasn't, I said it was because he ripped my jacket, because it was too embarrassing to admit what it was, which was that it yanked me down and I got hurt and I felt vulnerable. And like, if I felt vulnerable, I was coming at you.
Right.
And so that immediately came to mind was that sense of a grievance is if you humiliated me, you were taking something really sacred to me, which is a sense of I didn't want to feel vulnerable at all. And so I immediately felt like I had to pay you back to give myself a sense of confidence or invulnerability or something. I don't know. Yeah. I've been psychologizing this for all of 1 minute, so I don't know what it really was. But for me, that sense of a grievance and that dopamine hit whenever it happened.
Yeah, see, that's just it. Right.
That for me was I can think of numerous examples like that from when I was.
And that's why what James was talking about is so helpful. It connected like 2 or 3 dots in my brain about why I do some of the things that I do. And
tell us about them. You got to spill the beans.
I have many. I'll just tell the one that I keep coming back to in my life. But this was in 2008. I had just been transitioned from a position I was at, and I'm sitting in church and not paying attention, not listening to the sermon because I never do. So, and I just remember thinking to myself, I was fuming. I said, Lord, I just want justice. And he sort of had this God moment he talked about briefly, but for me, it was like this inner voice said, okay, let's start with you. I said, and I knew right away what was happening, the whole log and the eye thing, but it helped me to understand I didn't want justice. I wanted revenge, and I wanted God to do it for me. You know? Yeah. And I think of also the overlaying of that dynamic onto the God of the Bible.
Yeah, I was going to say not to bring the Bible into this,
but we can though. That's, you know, because there are places where the what we would call now the God of the multiverse is sort of petty and sort of vengeful, you know, and not always, but it's there, you know, and that's this projection of our humanity onto the sacred and all that. But I just remember, and then I've had to ask myself this question: why did this make you that angry that you wanted to seek revenge? And it's because my ego was wounded. It's as simple as that. I was a big deal someplace, and I was sort of pushed out, and I didn't like it, and you know, I used to think, and this is from talking with people who know things about this, but it's like, you know, I used to say, I just want to be respected. And one person said to me, do you want to be respected or adored? And I stopped about it, and I thought to myself, I think it might be adored and not just respected. See, all this stuff is happening that makes me react to certain things in certain ways. And that dopamine hit need that I have is really to fuel greater addictions that I have, right? So you start thinking about all this stuff, not in terms of sin or not sin, or righteous or not righteous, but in terms of just our chemistry, our evolution as human beings, and then taking a step back, which is itself a grace. Take a step back and look at the bigger picture and say, how do I want to live in all this? How do I want to be? How do I want to show up every single day? Yeah. And it's and I'm glad we had James on, because like I said, as I was going through his stuff before the interview, I was like, okay, that helps me actually process for myself what's going on sometimes.
Yeah. And I think the idea, I really, you can hear it in the episode, resonated with this idea of getting to that prefrontal cortex part of our brain, getting to the thinking part. And for me, I feel like that's what I've spent a lot of years working on in my own kind of development as a human being, to get to that place where I'm not reacting emotionally,
yes, right,
but I can respond. And for me, the difference between reacting and responding is how much is the prefrontal cortex online and how much of it is offline.
Right.
And so working to create that space has helped me. And I think the number one thing I've realized that I think James touched on was it's not actually hurting the other person, and it's not helping me to have these feelings of revenge.
Right.
And so am I the kind of person who's just going to act on them? Because then that becomes an action. And maybe I think it's going to do something. If I'm not going to do that, why even have the feelings of revenge? Like, work to let that go sooner rather than later. And for me, again, it only happens through working hard over years to not react to things, but respond to things.
Right. And for me, like the Venn diagram, the two circles, the one big one that's overlapping for me is, you know, Emil Gilchrist, the neuroscientist. We're not thinking beings who have emotions. We're emotional beings who happen to think. And all this stuff is happening on that deeper emotional reptilian brain kind of level. And it's true, and it's there, right? And we're giving into our lesser senses of self, and when we act that way, and it's rife. And you know, I can't point the finger at other people because I see it in myself, but you know, on a national level, you know, that's very much revenge, you know, even politically.
You know, as we're talking, I do think there's a sense in which we can name our hurt. Like, there is legitimate times in which people have harmed us. And it's not to dismiss that or minimize it. And I think that's important. It's actually the opposite, which I think this app that he talks about, the process of going through the prosecution and the defense, is a helpful process of naming it. Because I think a lot of times what happens is you just want to be seen and validated. Like, did you see that? That wasn't right, right? And I think even just having another person witness that, and maybe sometimes even just you witnessing that, is enough to let it go. And because I think sometimes we're so quick to maybe judge ourselves and say, well, I shouldn't feel this way. And that's not a good way either. So it's not either give in to this feeling of revenge or pretend that it wasn't prompted in some way. It's not like I just made this up. No, somebody did offend me. And sometimes that's on a spectrum. Sometimes it's a legit hurt and harm. And sometimes it's just an ego thing. But I think being able to, when it's a legitimate hurt, I think we have to be able to name that.
Mhm.
And it's even better if someone can give witness to that and say, yes, that was a wrong. They wronged you. They harmed you.
Mhm.
That allows me to, again, kind of get more out of that reptilian brain, kind of that feeling space, because my feelings are a messenger. My feelings are trying to tell me something.
Yes, right.
And so if I can articulate what they're trying to tell me, I was hurt by that. And you know what? I do think you wronged me.
Mhm.
That actually lessens the sense that I now need to retaliate.
Well, I mean, one last question, actually, I want to ask you. When people have been traumatized, forgiveness is sometimes a re-traumatizing thing because they sort of do it wrong, right? But I think James was
like asking for someone to, like asking forgiveness from the person you've traumatized. That's traumatized.
Or it's like, oh yes, or it's like, well, it's not that big of a deal. I need to just forgive them. So
right.
I'm wondering how, James was legitimately traumatized over years by bullies that then became somewhat even life-threatening, right? So I wonder how do you think James forgave those people? Was it a matter of saying, I'm not going to live in that space of revenge? Maybe that's enough. It's a simple, that's like saying, well, it's okay. We're all buddies now, right? That's toxic forgiveness. And that's sometimes what people insist. Like in churches,
or families.
Women who've been abused by their husband, they're told you need to just obey them. And
forgiveness means going back into a situation that's going to cause you further harm.
Right.
Which is not forgiveness.
Right, exactly. I just think it's important for people to hear that again and again, because some people struggle with that for very good reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I appreciate how James says it, which is forgiveness is about you and what's going on here. In that he called it, I forget what he called it. There were two kinds of, what was it? Decisional forgiveness.
Right.
Where that's up to you.
And emotional or mental, the other one? Or?
Yeah, and then emotional.
Yeah, right.
Right, correct.
Yeah, so, right.
But yeah, I think that's exactly right. And we don't want to conflate. And I think it's an important disclaimer. Because you're right. I think in churches and sometimes in families, there is this expectation that forgiveness means to go back to the systems and dynamics and relationships and patterns that we had before.
Right.
And that caused harm in the first place.
Right, that's the problem.
Not
right.
what forgiveness is.
Well, I think we learned today, I mean, I did anyway, just more to think about when I think about the human experience and what am I doing all day, and to be appropriately introspective about that. So
I think that's
a good interview.
Yeah, for me, that is one of the takeaways is thinking about the brain and how repetition creates deeper neural pathways that are hard to get out of. So if I'm in the habit of getting these dopamine hits, that's the addiction that can start to take over. And it's harder to have a pathway of forgiveness because I'm so addicted to the dopamine of revenge thinking and seeking, if not behaving. I'm still fantasizing about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right,
folks. Later.
Well, thanks to everyone who supports the show. If you want to support what we do, there are 3 ways you can do it. 1, if you just want to give a little money, go to thebiblefornormalpeople.com/give.
And if you want to support us and want an all-access pass to our classes, ad-free podcast, and a thoughtful community of people asking tough questions about the Bible and faith, you can become a member of our online community, the Society of Normal People, at thebiblefornormalpeople.com/join.
And lastly, it goes a long way if you just wanted to rate the podcast, leave a review, and tell others about our show. In addition, you can let us know what you thought about the episode by emailing us at info@thebiblefornormalpeople.com.
You've just made it through another episode of Faith for Normal People. Don't forget you can catch our other show, The Bible for Normal People, in the same feed wherever you get your podcasts. This episode was brought to you by the Bible for Normal People team: Brittany Hodge, Joel Limbowen, Lauren O'Connell, and Naomi Gonzalez.
Pete has old eyes, Joel. Is there any way you can make the picture a little bigger? Okay.
I do, and I'm proud of it. Okay.
I'm with you, Pete.
Yeah, I know. These young kids today, they don't get it, do they?
Yeah, these young kids in their 40s.
Is there a young kid there? I don't even
say.
I'm looking for a dopamine hit to take vengeance on him.
Yeah,
so,
let's do it.
Okay.
Right. Might as well ramp it up and illustrate it with a real life example, right?